Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and in today's video let's have a look at a topic that concerns every single one of you doing their flight planning with Simbrief, and that is the selection of alternate aerodromes. Now, in this you can make your flights a lot more realistic by saving quite a bit of fuel by simply flying at lighter weights because you're choosing better alternates than Simbrief does automatically. So let's go ahead and have a look into what we are going to do today. We are planning the Airline Flight 1762 from Paderborn to Sylt, and as you can see, there is no alternate chosen yet because I haven't chosen my aircraft yet. The reason I didn't do that is because I want you to see for yourself which alternate Simbrief is going to choose, and then we're going to have a look at why those are bad choices and why you can make much better choices in the closer area. At the end of the video, or probably more like the second half of the video, we are then going to have a look into some of the actual planning minima, and we're going to go into some detail for those of you who are really interested in the topic. Okay, now we're going to start though by having a look at what Simbrief selects automatically. Now, I've just chosen my aircraft, the Delta Alpha Bravo Hotel Golf, which is an A320-200. Now, here's the weather that here's the alternates that Simbrief has chosen automatically. As you can see, the fuel alternate chosen, which is Nuremberg, is almost twice the flying distance of our actual planned flight, which is rather insane unless there are good reasons for it. Now, since we're talking about alternates, we first of all need to understand what minima do we need to meet. I'm going to go into more detail on that towards the end of the video, but suffice to say that for now, if we just have a quick look into some very basic parameters, then we can already quickly determine much better alternates for our flight. So basically, the weather within plus or minus 1 hour of the estimated time of arrival at the alternate aerodrome needs to be good. So good meaning it needs to fulfill certain minima, which I'm going to cover towards the end of the video. But if we just have a general look, we will quickly get an idea of what I mean with a quick overlook. So first of all, for what time do we need to plan our alternates? We plan to depart at 10:30 UTC. We've got approximately 1 hour flight time to Sylt, so we arrive at 11:30. Then we need to conduct a missed approach at the minimum and then divert along the scheduled route to our alternate aerodrome. So the closest ones are Amsterdam and Berlin, and those are approximately 45 minutes of flight time away. So we can say that generally we end up with an arrival at the alternate at approximately 12:15 UTC the earliest, until maybe, say, 1300 UTC the latest for Nuremberg. So now let's go ahead and determine our window of weather suitability. Now, that's going to be from 11:15 until 13:15, plus or minus 1 hour of the estimated arrival at the outlet at 12:15. So if we have a quick look over at the weather that we've got over here, we've got Amsterdam, which has a couple of snow showers forecast in the morning, and then a little bit of wind with a prop 30 later on. So Amsterdam, a little bit windy, but apart from that, okay. Do note that prop 30 tempo does not need to be taken into account for your alternate planning. If we have a look at the other airports, then we've got Nuremberg down here, which is basically snowing the entire day, so not really that good. Then we've got Dresden over here, which is giving us also snow along the entire day, and especially in the evening, but quite a couple of winds in the arrival time for us. And then we've got Berlin planned over here, which is also not that nice. You can see we've got prop 40 temper, so prop 40 we need to take into account of light snow showers and 4,500 meters visibility with gusting winds down the runway as well. So all of those airports are not exactly that good. So now let's have a look into airports that an airline would probably have chosen more realistically, because those that we can see chosen by Simbrief over there are pretty far away from our destination. Now, generally, when you're choosing your alternate aerodrome, the airline will obviously go for something where it's easy to get the passengers out again. So either by bus, if you just bring the airplane home straight away, or just as a refueling stop in order to get your airplane back as soon as possible to commence new approaches at the destination if the weather has improved. And obviously, considering that Sylt is our alternate, then we've got Hamburg as a large city over here, we've got Bremen as a large city over here, we've got Lubec as a large city over there, all of which do have airports available. So the reason why Simbrief goes, for example, down here for Nuremberg is pretty much beyond me. Now, let's have a look into how an actual airline alternate planning might look like then. So we are going to start with our primary alternate in Hamburg. Then we are going to choose our secondary alternate as Lubec, Hotel Lima. Then we are going to pick our third alternate as Bremen. And our fourth alternate is going to become Hanover. So now we've got 4 airports which are much closer to our destination than previously, as you can see. Nuremberg is somewhere down here. Now the furthest is Hanover over here. That's less than half the distance. Now, obviously, we need to quickly check the weather as well. So if we go, for example, for Hamburg over here, then we can see that for our estimated arrival at 12:15, we need to disregard this because this ends at 11 and we're looking at 11:15 now. So we generally take the weather we've got up here, which is good weather conditions. Then looking at Lubec, we can also see that we've got good weather forecast. Looking at Bremen, we have got temper weather of 290 at 15 gust 25, which considers us. And then we've got the temper weather down here, 1200 meters, snow showers, broken 600 CB. So Bremen is probably not that good. And then finally, we have got Hanover, and Hanover, as you can see, is reporting gusty winds and snow showers with visibilities of 1200 meters as well. So Hanover ain't that good either. However, Hamburg is good, Lübeck is good, so if we simply go with Hamburg as our planned alternate, we are very good to go. Now let's hit calculate and compare and have a look at a little comparison of the savings we can achieve by doing our alternate planning manually. As you can see, if we use Hamburg as our primary alternate, we get a block fuel of 5,117 kilograms. Now, if I just return this to Simbrief's original Nuremberg and then calculate that, let's have a look at what we get now. So Nuremberg is in, calculate and compare. And all of a sudden, you can see that we get a block fuel of 1,149 kilograms more than what we originally had with our alternate at Hamburg. So that is quite an additional amount of fuel that we are going to carry over here for, well, nothing. So as you can see, you can save 1,149 kilograms of fuel in comparison to what Simbrief would have done by default, and that is a lot of money. That's over $1,000 for your airline. All right, so that much for the general idea of how you can improve your general Simbrief alternate planning. Now let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into the entire topic of alternate airports, when you need an alternate at all, when you might even need 2 alternates, and obviously what your planning minima is. This is going to get a little bit more technical now, so if you just wanted to know how you can optimize your plan, then I would recommend simply look for large cities that are nearby, where you've got a good chance of getting your passengers transported away from, or where you can simply refuel, which can happen at smaller airports as well if the general weather conditions are good. All right, so now let's have a look into a couple of the actual criteria. Now, we're going to start with when do we need an alternate airport at all? So, when do we need one? For every flight, at least one destination alternate aerodrome must be selected unless all the following conditions are met. The duration of the planned flight from takeoff to landing does not exceed 6 hours, or in the event of in-flight replanning does not exceed 4 hours. The cloud ceiling is no lower than 2,000 feet or circling height plus 500, whichever is higher, and visibility at least 5 kilometers. There must be no shallow fog, no thunderstorms, no heavy precipitation, and the wind must be below the prescribed limitation. Additional fuel to hold for 15 minutes at 1,500 feet above the destination aerodrome elevation is required, and 2 separate runways are available and allow a safe landing at the destination. Do note that separate runways actually means separate landing surfaces, so you cannot say, for example, that you'll just take the opposite approach side because the wind is calm. That's not going to work. You need 2 separate runways. So if all of those conditions are met, you do not need an alternate aerodrome at all. Now, likewise, instead of not needing one at all, there are also situations in which you need two alternate aerodromes. And that is the case when the destination aerodrome is below the planning minima, or when no meteorological information is available for your destination aerodrome. In those cases, you need two destination alternate aerodromes. Now, if you need two alternates, then that's pretty easy to calculate. You can simply go ahead and have a look down here in the alternate planning. Then you determine which one is further away. So if we have a look, Hamburg, 205 nautical miles. Then we have a look at Lubec, 154 nautical miles. In other words, if you just take the fuel for Hamburg, then you're already covered with your second airport of Lubec as well. So that's about as easy as it gets in order to pick your two destination alternate airports. Obviously, they need to be listed down here as well, so you can't just go with a single airport in that list. You need two at least. All right, so now let's have a look into the planning minima for your alternate airports. We've already talked about when you don't need one or when you need two. Let's have a look at the case that's pretty much in use 99.x% of times, which is you've got a single alternate required. Now, planning minima are established for each aerodrome based on the applicable landing minima for the runways as per the charts available. Now, generally, we already said that the weather needs to be within the required minima within the estimated time of arrival plus or minus 1 hour. We calculate the estimated time of arrival, as I said earlier, by taking your trip to the destination, conducting a missed approach at the minimum, and then flying along the flight planned route to your alternate airport. Now, if we have a look into the minima, we need to understand a difference between instrument approaches. There's two different types of instrument approaches. That's type A and type B instrument approaches. Now, type A instrument approaches are those where the minimum is equal to or greater than 250 feet above aerodrome destination. So this basically means that type A approaches are all RNAV approaches, all localizer approaches, all VOR approaches, all NDB approaches, all SRA approaches, and possibly ILS Cat 1 approaches if the charted minima is equal to or greater than 250 feet. Likewise, type B approaches then are ILS Cat 2, ILS Cat 3, and ILS Cat 1 if the minima is within 200 to less than 250 feet above destination elevation. Do note you always need to take into account the height over here and not the altitude above MSL. So I'll show you that as an example in a few moments. Now, if we continue from here, we now have the two categories established. Now, the next one, you probably just take out your pen and keep writing along because this is going to be a little theoretical now. So, in order for your destination alternate aerodrome, first of all, you need to take one engine in operations into account. So, for example, if you're flying a 737, you can no longer do Cat 2 or Cat 3 approaches. You can only do Cat 1 approaches, so you can no longer plan with Cat 2 or Cat 3 minima. In Airbus aircraft, by the way, the aircraft is still capable of Cat 3 approaches if you've got a single engine failure. Okay, so let's have a look into the required minimum weather for our approaches now. So if you've got two or more usable type B instrument approaches with two separate runways, you need a decision altitude or height plus 100 feet and minimum RVR plus 300 feet. Sorry, meters, plus 300 meters. If you've got one usable type B instrument approach, you need a decision altitude of plus 150 feet and RVR plus 450 meters. If you've got a 3D type A instrument approach, that would be any that includes vertical guidance, for example, ANA, then you need at least your decision altitude plus 200 feet as cloud ceiling and at least the RVR plus 800 meters. If you have two or more usable type A instrument approaches without 3D guidance, each based on a separate navigation aid, you need your decision altitude or MDA plus 200 feet and visibility plus 1000 meters. And if you've only got one usable Type A instrument approach operations or only circling approaches, then you need your decision altitude or MDA plus 400 feet and visibility plus 1500 meters. So that's the minimum we have in order for an airport to be considered suitable as a destination alternate. Now, if we have a look into these now, let's have a look at the practical example. We're going to start with Hamburg, just to give you a general basic look. So let's go over to the Navigraph charts, and we are going to go for Hamburg over here. Give me those charts, please. So we can see that the general forecast is a wind of 250 at 12, and it's becoming 310 at 8. So in both cases, runway 23 would be in use over in Hamburg. So let's have a look now at the ILS approach chart for runway 23. Now, first of all, what type of approach is this? Now, as we can see, we are going to fly a Category Charlie aircraft with the A320, and the approach minima for the ILS Cat 1 is at 219 feet above the ground level. So this, plus the availability of a Cat 2 and Cat 3 approach, make this a Type B instrument approach. Now, if we just assume that we are flying a 737, then we need to disregard the Cat 3 and the Cat 2 minima, as since I mentioned we need to consider the engine out case. So engine out, 737, you can no longer fly Cat 2 or Cat 3 operation, so we need to consider Cat 1 only. Now, I mentioned earlier that the difference between a Cat or between a Type A and a Type B approach is the minimum for a Cat A approach, or for a Type A approach, I need to say, is 250 feet or higher, but those 250 feet or higher always concern the height above the aerodrome elevation, not the height above MSL. So Hamburg is a very good example here. You can see that the published minimum is 262 feet. However, those 262 feet are above the mean sea level. If we take the height of the airport in account, we're looking at a runway elevation of 43 feet. So the actual minimum is 219 feet above the ground. So even though the first look at the minimum of 262 would make it seem to be a Type A approach, it is actually a Type B approach because we need to take the height and not the altitude into consideration to determine the type of approach. In other words, Hamburg runway 23 is a Type B approach. Now, in order to determine if the airport is suitable, we need to have a look at how many Type B approaches to separate runways are available. So if we take a look at the general layout of Hamburg, then we can see that they've got crossing runways over here. So we've got runway 23, and then there would also be runway 33 or runway 15. Now, if we have a look into the weather again, we can see that in general, runway 15 would be the least favorable runway because they have a slight tailwind component. So runway 33 would be the one that would be favored over here. Now, if we have a look into the approaches, however, for runway 33, you can see there's only an RNAV approach. And an RNAV approach, as we mentioned, has a minimum of at least 250 feet, provided it doesn't have LPV. However, LPV we can't do with our aircraft, so LPV doesn't count. So we have a look at the LNAV VNAV minima only. And as you can see, that's a lot higher. So this one is a Type A approach. However, what we can do for legal planning purposes, not that it would make a lot of sense, but just for legal planning purposes, we can say that Hamburg also has runway 15 available as a landing runway, because if we have a look at the weather over here, 250 at 12 is just a slight tailwind component. It's less than the 10 knots maximum tailwind, so we can go into that. And even in the worst case, if we take the becoming weather in account over here, 310 at 8, that's still less than 10 knots of tailwind, so we are allowed to land on runway 15. If we now have a look at runway 15 and the approach chart of runway 15, we can see that down here we've got an ILS Cat 1 minima published. It's at a height of less than 250 feet, so this is also a Type B approach available. In other words, for our alternate planning, Hamburg has two Type B approaches available, and that means that we can take the lower minima. So if we have a look now into our table again, that Hamburg counts as airport that has 2 or more usable Type B instrument approaches to 2 separate runways. That means in order to be legal to plan Hamburg as our alternate aerodrome, we can use the decision altitude plus 100 feet and RVR plus 300 meters. So let's now go to the higher of the minima. You can see the ILS 15 202 and the ILS 23 219. So generally, we need that height plus 100 feet. So 219 plus 100, 319. In other words, the cloud ceiling needs to be at least in 400 feet in order to be allowed to use this approach. Also, we need the RVR plus 300 meters. So the RVR we can see down here. Now, we need to take into consideration our NOTAMs to see if, for example, the touchdown zone lights or the centerline lights were out. In that case, you can see that we would have increased RVR minima down here, or if we take the approach light system out, then we'd have at least 1200 meters RVR. However, none of these is published in the NOTAMs right now, so we can take the full RVR, 550 meters. Now let's quickly have a look at the other approach, and that one down here is, again, NOTAMs taken in consideration. When a flight director or autopilot or HUD to decision altitude is not used, well, we do a flight director, so we can take 550 meters RVR. In other words, we can now say that we need 550 meters plus 300 meters, so we end up with 850 meters RVR for our planning minima for Hamburg. So in order to be legal to use Hamburg as an alternate aerodrome, we need at least 400-foot cloud ceiling and 850 meters RVR. If we now have a look into the forecast weather, then we can see that Hamburg is forecast with few clouds in 600. However, few and scattered are not ceilings, only broken and overcast are, and the clouds are forecast broken in 1500. And even if we want to be conservative, if we go down here and take that tempo weather, even though we are forecast to arrive later than this, if we just take it to be conservative, then we can say that we still got 1200 meters visibility forecast, so that's more than the 850 required. And we've got broken clouds in 600 with CVs, which still is more than the required 400-foot minima. In other words, Hamburg is legal to be used as an alternate. Now, we could go the very same way for the other approaches. If we just take one more example and have a look at Lubec down here, then we can see that the weather forecast is generally all good. However, due to the proximity to Hamburg, I would personally say that chances are that the weather could be a little bit worse than what is actually forecast over here. So let's just have a general look over here into Lubec. So let's go for it. Lubec, give me my charts. Okay, so we've got runway 07 or runway 25. If we have a look at the weather forecast over here, then we can see the wind is generally coming from the west, so runway 25 is going to be our expected landing runway. If we now have a look into runway 25 down here, we can see that Lubec has an ILS at 246 feet above ground. So 246 feet means that Lubec is a Type B approach, but barely just. Remember, from 250 feet and higher, it would be a Type A approach. But due to the minimum being 246, it still is a Type B. We've got an RVR requirement of 800 meters, so if we now apply the same minimum, then we need to go into the table, and the table says if the airport has one usable Type B instrument approach operation, that is the case over here, then we need to take a decision altitude plus 150 feet and minimum RVR plus 450 meters for the airport to be permissible as destination alternate aerodrome. Now, if we calculate that out, then we end up with 246 plus 150 means 396. So again, we need a cloud ceiling at basically 400 feet. And for our visibility, we need 800 meters RVR plus 450. So 1,250 meters visibility in order for Lubec to be usable as our destination alternate aerodrome. So again, we end up with the weather forecast being quite far above it. We are able to use Lubec as our alternate. And that way you could now go ahead and calculate all the different minima. All right, so that much about our alternate planning. Now, if we just want to make things a little bit more complex, then let's just consider the United States of America, which obviously are going to be completely different. So, in the US, planning minima for an alternate aerodrome are as follows. For airports with at least one operational navigation facility providing a straight and non-precision approach category or category 1 precision approach, or when applicable a circling maneuver from an instrument approach procedure, you need to add 400 feet to the MDA or decision altitude as applicable, and you need to add 1 statute mile or 1,600 meters to the landing minima. For airports with at least 2 operational navigational facilities, each providing a straight-in approach procedure to different suitable runways, you need to add 200 feet to the higher decision altitude, or MDA, of the 2 approaches used, and you need to add half a statute mile, or 800 meters, to the higher authorized landing minima of the 2 air approaches used. If you've got one usable authorized Category 2 ILS approach, you need a ceiling of at least 300 feet, and the visibility of at least 3/4 of a statute mile, or an RVR of 4,000 feet. And if you've got one usable authorized Category 3 ILS instrument approach procedure, you need a ceiling of at least 200 feet and a visibility of half a statute mile, or an RVR of 1,800 feet or greater. Welcome to the US. All right, that shall basically cover our alternate plannings. With all of that, you should be able to make much more realistic flight plans using your Simbrief dispatch. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much for watching. See you all again on the next one, and enjoy your little bit more realistic flights. Thank you very much, and if you did like the video, be sure to leave a like in the YouTube algorithms, as well, as it does really help out the channel. Be sure to leave a comment to let me know what you think about this one, and finally, if you really like what I'm doing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as it will always give you the new updates about new videos as early as possible. Finally, if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. But until then, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching, and see you all again on the next one.